welcome to another episode of the CIV Podcast. This is actually a special episode. If you're watching with us, you'll notice that we're not in our regular studio room. We're in our actual youth center for Church in the Valley. We have quite a big group of people here. We've got 8 other individuals, and you probably already noticed that I'm not your regular host. I'm not Ryan or Alex. I'm Pastor Abraham, and we just bringing you kind of a different episode today to talk a bit about an experience that our young adults and some of our young adult leaders had at a conference called Exponential. Before I talk about Exponential, before we get there, let me just run it really quick. Let's get some names for everybody. For those that are watching who might not know you, your faces, or for those who are listening and who don't know who's in the room, let's just run it real quick, and we'll start on the opposite end of me. And just tell me your name, and you might know. Name. Alex.
Yeah, I'm Alex. Maybe you recognize me from the other episodes, but yeah, I serve on the Young Adult Leadership team.
My name's Esther, and I also serve on the Young Adult Leadership team.
Hi, I'm Jolly, and I also serve on the Young Adult Leadership team.
Jolly, you might remember from one of our other episodes. She's also our worship pastor. So it doesn't just serve on the Young Adult Leadership team, but also does worship here at CIV. Yep.
I'm Daniel. I do worship here at CIV.
Hi, guys. It's Ryan. I host a podcast. I also serve on the worship team.
Mm-hmm. Hi, I'm Alyssa, and I serve on the Young Adult Leadership team.
Hi, I'm Aaron, and I serve on the Young Adult Leadership team.
And I'm Meredith, and I also serve on the Young Adult Leadership team.
Yeah, the cool thing is that if you are a part of our church, you know that a lot of these people that serve on the leadership team for young adults don't just serve there; they serve in quite a number of other areas. So they're quite involved. But we had an opportunity this year. This is 2024. We had an opportunity to go to Orlando, Florida, to check out an Exponential, and it's a conference that's a church planting conference with an emphasis on discipleship. And so this year's emphasis was 180. That was their title, right? A shift to discipleship. And so it's an amazing conference. If you are listening, you hadn't had the chance to go yet, I highly recommend it. It's not just about church planting. It's literally like anything to do with church. If it's worship music, if it's tech, if it's leadership, mental health, like women in ministry, whatever, you name it, they've got workshops, they've got speakers. Mm-hmm. It's an amazing chance for you to just kind of grow in God and grow in your ministry and in your leadership. But in this episode, we really wanted to talk about kind of the experience that you guys had. Because I know that while we were there for 4 days of the conference, and we were in Airbnb, and we debriefed like every night. And every night there was like something powerful, something amazing that happened with you guys, some experience that you guys had that kind of began to shift, right? How do you have 4 different days of shifting and crying and emotions, right? For a lot of us, we were a wreck. I'm glad you guys can't see that, but we were a mess. And so I kind of just want to give you guys the opportunity to share a little bit about what you learned at Expo. What was that like for you? Maybe what's some of the biggest takeaways? We don't have a lot of time to unpack all those days for everybody, but what was that like for you? What did you learn? What did God really place on your heart? And then as you come back to church and as you come back to serving in your ministries, what are some of the things that maybe you want to shift or you want to change in your church or in your ministry that you're either leading in or participating in? So yeah, that's the question for today. I don't know who wants to go first.
I can go first.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I don't mind. So for me, the biggest takeaway, the way that Exponential was kind of structured was that we had pre-conferences, so kind of like these workshops that we would go to before the conference started. And for me, that's where the biggest takeaway came from. I was in a pre-conference called An Invitation to the Next Wave. Building scrappy churches, deconstruction, neighborliness, all these different things that I actually didn't know what any of it meant. I was just kind of like, well, that sounds interesting, gonna go check it out. And I ended up coming out of it with kind of my eyes open with this new passion and desire of I want to build something from the ground up. And I don't know what that's going to look like. I also don't know what that means. It's whatever God has planned for me in the future. But just that idea of deconstructing something that isn't working anymore, and kind of building up a new system or a new culture or something else that's going to reach people, not just church people, but the unchurched, that's going to reach them and make them want to follow Jesus. And so that's kind of what I left there with. And I was reading my notes today just so that I could be prepared. And the first thing I wrote down was, do you want to grow or do you want to stay small? And the speaker was talking about a hermit crab and how as they grow, they move out of their shell and they find a bigger shell that's going to, fit their growth. And I just thought, and I spoke to Aaron about this, how, growth can be uncomfortable and it can sometimes mean insecurity, but it's so great. And I can grow in uncomfortable situations. And, deconstruction and building something like that is uncomfortable. Then that's great. I'm growing, and that's what God wants for me. And so what that means for me coming back into my ministry and coming back to church is, I think, kind of changing the culture that we have at church, and decoding it. So kind of trying to figure out, what's going on here, what's the culture like at this church, what does that mean for people, and decoding it so that we can start doing something new, something better, and something that's gonna make people grow in Jesus.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit of like what is decoding?
So for example, one of the things that they focused on was the next generation, and how different they view the world. And a lot of the time, the older generation and the younger generation, they clash. Because the older generation isn't willing to understand, and it's kind of like computer decoding, where you have to look at them and decode, take out and understand different aspects of their culture, so that you can see, oh, this is what they're about. So that's kind of what I mean by decoding, is kind of looking at all the little intricacies and different aspects of the culture to get a full understanding, and then going from there to seeing what works, what doesn't work, what can we do better, whatever the next wave looks like. And
I think that's so cool because it's not about rewriting a code, right? It's not about overwriting what has been done in the past, right? Because I think all of you guys could probably relate to this, that it's such an easy struggle to move into in church, where you have youth and you have energy and you have a whole different worldview and a different way of doing things. And when you clash, it's easy to think it's us versus them. We just need to overtake, or we need to like change the way that they think or the way that they do things. But you're talking about decoding and deconstruction, where it's not about destroying and undoing, but rather kind of trying to understand each other so that you take the best out of both systems and both worldviews, so that it becomes a harmony versus like, what's the opposite of a harmony? Music.
Disharmony.
Disharmony?
Chaos.
Dissonance, chaos, right? Whatever that is. I think that's so cool. Because we were listening to one of our elders in our group chat a while ago sent a devotional, and they were talking about, the lady was talking about how young people are often in church fighting to find their place in church. And then older folks are often fighting to not be irrelevant in church. And it's so easy to overwrite young people and say, well, that's not the way we do things. Or it's so easy to overwrite old people and say, well, that's dead and gone. But church, like healthy churches, decoding is about understanding each other, right? Seeking to understand and moving forward. That's so cool. I love that. Yeah.
That rocks.
What are you guys thinking, like, as you guys are listening to that? Because all of us are young. Like, all of us here are under 35, right? Like, Esther, I think you're the youngest, right? Esther, tell the people how old you are.
Oh, 20.
Yeah, Esther's 20. And
20
I
years
think I'm
old.
the oldest here. I'm 31, turning 32. So, like, by no stretch of the imagination are we old. Maybe the teenagers we might be, but, like, we're all, like, young, right? So what have you seen in church?
Yeah, sure. For me, I don't have a voice. I'm going to try to keep this short. But even what Meredith was saying, like, what I really took from it, and obviously I've been someone who's grown in the church for like a long time, and especially I've been here at CIV for like maybe like 8 years now. But obviously I feel like there has been a lot of change, but I've always gone with the flow as a kid, and like now that I'm older, kind of just getting into that routine of like what CIV is and what we do here. But I really took from the conference was like empowerment, not only in the sense as a young person, but like as a woman as well. It's really easy to try and fill your cup when you're trying to serve every Saturday. And for me, at least, like I was always, don't get me wrong, I love being here. I used to say I always live for my Saturdays, but I think that also took away from Monday to Friday and how am I being a disciple from my week. And I was only coming to church just for the one Saturday just to feel refilled. And yeah, like for me, at least, it really struck a chord when we went to one of the pre-conferences in for women in ministry. And there was a specific person that they kept talking about, and it was Mary Magdalene. And that really struck a chord because I'm going to tell you this, like, honestly, God was speaking to me through and through, like from the second I left to like I got off the plane, landed here back at home. But like just to hear that she was not like part of the 12, but she was there hanging around, you know what I mean? And I kind of resonate with that because like on my off days, I'll be here. You'll see me walking through the door of the church. I'm like, I'm going to church to hang out, even if it's just go sit with Jolly or do something like that.
Yeah, Alex is always here.
Yeah. They have me in the guest room sometimes. But yeah, like for me, it really struck a chord because I'm like, I don't need to be per se like ordained or have that physical piece of paper to disciple people. And I think that's what we all felt when we went there. We don't have to. And even a sermon that you gave just last week was you can like disciple people at any point in your life. You don't have to reach this perfection of like, okay, now I'm ready to step into this, because that's also what I took was I don't have to be full on perfect. I mean, no one here is perfect, let's be real. But and for me, that was an empowerment myself because people find that they can relate to someone who is broken or who is weird or who is, like says sometimes out of pocket stuff, but like in the sense of like you feel comfortable. And that's really what I wanted to take back too, was to make my peers or the younger ones that are looking up to me, especially the young girls that I see serving at Kids Zone Church, that they don't have to go anywhere else to find that validation, that we can be those people to them. And even it's me just like, going up on stage and being like, girl, I'm broke, because it's true. But like for people to understand that it's hard and it's okay, but like we're all not perfect and I don't have to be on that stage. And I think it also falls under like where I serve and worship and all those things. Like if I'm my authentic self, then people will feel comfortable. And going back to the story of Mary Magdalene, like she honestly did not, like Jesus was the first person to go and be like, bro, like go tell the boys that I'm here. And she without a doubt ran back to the village and lives were changed because of that. And I think it takes powerful like women also to step into those roles and take those risks. So also I think about like Jolly and Allison who like are here at CIV, and to recognize that also that can be like me. Like I don't have to be at a certain point in my life to be like I can start doing those type of things. So yeah, and like you were saying, to deconstruct and to rebuild from the conference was discipleship and church planting, yeah. And I honestly was like, okay, like I don't think I'm gonna go plant a church, but what I took from that was like, and I said this many times before, I can't hear it again, but God has given us this seed here at CIV, and it's up to us, to continue to water that and to, grow it into something beautiful that is beneficial for all of us and for the new people that are going to come. And so, yeah, I think that's what I really took from it. And honestly, age does play a factor. Like, honestly, I feel like us young people, we're go-getters and we have all this energy. So where can we put that into? Like, it can go into different places, but are we doing it for the glory of God or for the glory of ourselves? So, yeah, that's what I got.
Yeah, that's so cool, because I know you were talking about kind of being in that space of feeling like, I don't know if I can do this, right? And I think this is something that's in Adventism especially. And I don't know about if it's like really prevalent in other denominations, but typically in Adventism, we have pastors that are leaders that are like trained professionals. Like that's literally what they do. Like that's what I did. I went to, my undergrad. I did my undergrad in theology and religious studies. I'm just about to finish my master's this summer. And so this is all I do. Like I've never had really any other career. It's pastoring has been for me. But at Exponential, like you see, it's a little different, right? Where you see a lot of these church planters are bivocational. I know one of the workshops that I went to, like she's a medical doctor, like she has a practice, but she's also a church planter and the pastor of her church, and like is leading a growing and thriving church, right? And so I don't know if anybody else. Actually, I think maybe like Ryan or Alyssa, as you think about that context of kind of demystifying pastoral leadership and kind of entering into that headspace of like, hey, you know what? I don't have to have an undergrad or a master's or a PhD or a doctorate in pastoral ministry to do ministry. Like, talk to us a little bit about kind of what went through your guys' head, because I know when we talked about it, like both of you are teachers, right? And you had a big impact with how that plays into your life. So tell us a little bit about your experience and kind of maybe some of the highlights for you and seeing that shift for you at Exponential.
Okay, yeah. So I think for me, like a big kind of word that I took from Exponential is intentionality. I think that although it like is going to play a huge role in how we do ministry moving forward, I think I'm taking a lot more intentional moments in my classroom to recognize the work that God is doing in the lives of my students, but also just in our classroom and like the things we go through, and giving that kind of honor to God instead of just kind of giving it to ourselves and thinking, oh, it's just a coincidence or something. Taking a step back and showing these kids that like, no, like we can give glory to God in these tiny, like minute kind of things that happen throughout our day. And I think then in ministry, like just being intentional with my time and intentional with the interactions that we have, whether that's at church or, reaching out during the week to these people that we see just kind of once a week typically. I think that the conference has really just inspired me to to be that disciple to other people and to be intentional about reaching out not just on Sabbath or, having Sabbath lunch or something, but taking the time out of our busy schedules to just be like, hey, let's sit down and chat about your week or whatever they want to talk about. But I think that's something that from the conference, not only do you not have to be at this like specific place in your life to do these things, but it doesn't have to be like a deep theological Bible study with these people. Like some people just need community and they just need connection. And so how can I, as someone who does have that community, like share that with someone else? And I think just intentionality is something that moving forward, I think I always kind of knew that it was important, but just seeing it in like such a broader scope of like ministry and my job and the little kids I teach, but also like my peers and older people and how that all can kind of come together into this really beautiful like mentorship, discipleship kind of idea.
Because you teach, like, what do you teach?
Yeah, so I teach kindergarten. So they're very excited about everything.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I think like the beauty of like my position is that I can make them super excited about Jesus, and I have that ability to just show them the beauty in everything that we do.
Yeah.
But I know Ryan teaches high school, so it's a little more scary to me in the high school department, but I'm sure it's very similar.
So like when it comes to kindergarten, like because you said you don't have to have these deep theological conversations with people for it to be discipleship, right? Like not that it's surface in any way, but you're meeting these people where they're at, where you're caring for them, and you're in kind of in a relationship in a unique way that is relational. So it looks to their heart, and like you don't need to have a conversation about like the intricacies of salvation or the Trinity with a kindergartner, right? But maybe all they need to know is that like Jesus loves them, right? And that he cares about the big things and the little things, right? And I love, because we talked about this last week, I love that you said that, for a lot of these kids that come in, even though they come to a Christian school, like a private school, a lot of them don't really have that background. They might just be there for the sake that it's a private school. And so you were saying that for a lot of these kindergartners, you might be the only time that they really encounter a loving Jesus, like a Jesus that actually is lived, right? And I think that that's so powerful when we really frame our lives around that, where we're not thinking, okay, I just come to church and I'm a member of a church and, the preaching is done by the pastor and the studies are done by the pastor. Like each of us here are a pastor in our own local communities. Mm-hmm. So whatever neighborhood you're living in, you're the pastor of that neighborhood. Whatever job you're at, you're a pastor to that workforce. Like whatever classroom you're in, you're a pastor to that classroom. And I think when we kind of shift our mind to think from that viewpoint, life really changes. Because now you're not thinking about me and mine. You're thinking about how am I really like preaching and showing God to someone that might never encounter him otherwise, might never set foot into the doors of a church, right? Which I think is so powerful. When we really like think, this is what we call the priesthood of all believers. But all of us have access to God and are to minister to others on behalf of God sometimes, right? And I know Ryan, because you had a similar experience where you're like shifting the way that you're thinking. So tell us about that.
Yeah. So honestly, like we went to a church planting and discipleship conference, and honestly, before we went, I was like, well, what do I know about church planting? Like, who am I to be a church planter?
Because this is just something to note for those that are listening. For both of you, this is your first year teaching.
Yes.
Right? Which is cool.
It's scary.
It's scary. Scary.
And it's interesting that Alyssa's kindergarten, I'm high school, so it's like completely different. But
different spectrums.
I see the same exact things, but like going into it, I was like, I don't know, really church planter, like what? I don't know, discipleship, who? Like, but when I really thought about it, I really saw the perspective that you had, and as we went through the conference, that like I am a church planter, and I am a discipleship maker to my students and to my colleagues, to the parents. My interactions with all of those people are influenced by the way that I am showing God through my interactions with them, which we all have, because we all work jobs outside of church, and we all interact with people who are Christian and non-Christian. So we are that like point of God for a lot of people that we meet. But I think for me, my perspective really changed when during one of the main sessions, we heard Will Chung. Shout out Will Chung. We love you, Will Chung. Woo!
I think everybody here loved Will Chung.
We love Will Chung, dude. Will Chung, if you're watching this, Church in the Valley, come do a week of prayer if you want.
I think he's like he's a millennial, right?
30, so like, 31? I don't
31, know. About my age. More relatable than I am. Cooler than I am.
So it's subjective. But
he was great. He was awesome.
Will Chung, so good. But like he said two things. He had two main points, but he really had three main points. His first point was the analogy of being a canal versus being a reservoir. Whereas canals just like water washes right through them. One like in one end and out the other. Whereas reservoirs, they hold water, and when they overflow, like they overflow just enough water to stay in the reservoir. So in terms of me and my ministry as a teacher, it's important to me to also be filled, and also allow myself to be filled while overflowing for others who need it. And that was a big realization for me, because like going into this, I was not low key. I was burnt out. And I was saying this in so many ways. Like, and I think for a lot of us, this conference came at the right time in all of our lives. So I really needed that analogy and that shift to be able to be like, well, I need to be filled too, and it's important that I'm also filled. So what were the other 2 points? So he also said, create spaces where you don't have to be fake, where you can truly be yourself, which means noticing that I need help, noticing my flaws, noticing when I am burnt out, so that I can recognize when I'm being a canal and when I'm being a reservoir, and just being the most vulnerable and authentic that I can for my students, for everybody that I'm interacting with. And then the third thing he said was that you need to take spaces of time in your life when you aren't producing, and it's just you and God. And he said something that blew my mind away that I didn't really think about. But when Jesus started his ministry, he was 30. So there was a span of time when Jesus was born and declared the King of Jews up to when he was 30, where he wasn't even active in ministry. He was mundane, like us. Maybe he went to a conference, like Expo, right? But he didn't start until he was 30. And, all of us here except Abraham are under the age of 30. But
thanks for pointing that out.
If you don't know. But our lives have just begun. And I think sometimes we get to 25 or we get to 26 and we think, oh, I'm washed out. There's nothing left for me. I should have been accomplished by now. But if we look back at Jesus's life, Jesus was 30 and that's when he started. So I just think I need to reassess my life now and get out of that idea that I am washed out and that I'm burnt out, and start believing that this is now a starting point that God can actually start working in my life, and that I can actually start my ministry. Not saying that you have to be 25 and washed up to be to know that you start your ministry, but looking at Jesus, he didn't start right away, or he didn't start when he was 17. He took that time to realize what his utmost purpose was, and what God really wanted for him, which is what I think the whole reason of why he was the prime example of being a disciple, because he discipled and he was discipled, he was a disciple and he discipled. So I think now moving forward, I have been discipled. I'm recognizing all of the people that it took in my life for me to get to this point now. And I want to share that. I want to disciple, and be that source of light for other people. And that is so important to recognize as a young person, as a young adult. Like you were talking about, the young adults were always trying to find our place, find our purpose. That was actually one of the things mentioned at a workshop we went to too. Gen Z wants purpose and wants a place. And knowing that I don't have to be 40, or I don't have to be 30, or I don't have to be 18 and have a place, that's huge. And that's a message that everyone should know, whether you're 9 or whether you're 60. You have a place, and it's never too late to start. So, as a teacher, that's what I'm taking back. That's what I'm coming back. If a student doesn't want to go to university, that's okay. Take some time. If a student doesn't want to do this class because I'm teaching it, that's okay. Take your time. But again, with the intentionality and just having that intentional time with just me and God, so that I can realize my purpose. That's huge.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Right? Because when we talk about, as I love that story that you talked about Jesus waiting until he was 30, right? And then even when he started, in the book of John, he was just to his mom, he's it's not my time. And his mom's no, go do it, right? And he's okay, mom, right? But I think it's so cool that there's this idea of he was a reservoir where he filled himself up with God, and then poured out of that overflow. But also he continued to connect with God. It wasn't a thing that he's okay, I'm filled, I'm ready, now I'm going to pour out till I'm empty. It's he continually stopped and had those moments of personal reflection and personal time with God. And I think when you think of that canal versus reservoir, a canal it never holds anything. It just passes it straight through, right? I think so many of us, in ministry can do that, where we're so involved in ministry that it just becomes what we do, but we never take time to pause and be filled. Right? I think it was Will Chung that said, your greatest obstacle to a relationship with God is your ministry for God. And I was like, wow. Because I know, like, as a pastor, I've fallen into that, where in the past, I've turned my sermon writing and my sermon prep into devotional time. It's like, that's not devotional time. That's work. And so I've really had to take that same time to, like, pause and be like, no, I need my time to fill and be filled, right? And I love that you're taking that into, like, your classroom, thinking about, yeah, how am I going to disciple? How am I going to be, like, vulnerable? How am I going to be open and honest, right? And I know that you had, like, some very vulnerable moments. Like, I'm gonna talk about it, right? Like, you had some vulnerable moments, right? And I think for you, like, that's, like, I know, I think you shared that that's not really normal for you, right? To be, like, vulnerable and emotional. And I think that's so important for us as guys, because I think the tide is shifting a bit. But predominantly us as men, we want to just be like, yeah, I'm okay, right? We want to be the rock. We want to be the solid person that, is there for our family, for our friends. But then to have that moment of vulnerability to say, like, I'm not okay. I need help, right? Like, that is tough, but it's also inspiring for, like, anyone that's listening, whether you're 8, I don't know if we have 8-year-olds listening, but, like, whether you're 8 or 80 or 88, right? Like, we need to be able to have that space to talk with someone and say, like, I'm not okay, right? Like, I'm struggling. I need help, right? And I think that that's so important for our personal growth. And then as us as disciples, like, as we think about that and creating that space for discipleship, that means that we have to make that space for someone. But then also be vulnerable too. It's not just a one-way street, right? We do that for each other. So that's so cool. Like, I'm glad you got to come, Ryan, because I know this was, like, last minute for you, and, like, but yeah, you're right. Like, it did come at this, like, opportune moment for you, right? Because it, like, Ryan, you're a great guy, and it seems like you've got it all together, right? But I know that, like, all of us, we all put up a front sometimes, where we're just like, I want to be seen as okay, and I'm not, right? So that's so key, which is awesome. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being vulnerable with us.
It's okay to cry, guys.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. If you know, like, I think Jolly knows because we always talk about it. But, like, me and Nim, we always talk about how much we cry all the time. Like, Nim more than me. Like, we'll admit it. Nim cries a lot more than me, right? Like a sunset, we'll get him. But yeah, like, it's okay to cry. It's okay to be vulnerable and to feel what you're feeling, right? Yeah, that was. I'm not gonna talk about my highlight, but that was one of the conferences I went to was about that. And they talked about feel your feelings, which was really cool. Yeah. Anyone else? Because I know we've got Esther, Jolly, Danny, Aaron. Still got to share your highlights.
Yeah, I'll talk about it. Yeah, Exponential was a dynamic experience because I've never had something drain me so heavily and fill me up so much at the same time. Every night I would go and I would just be kind of going through it, but in a good way, going through it with God and working through things. And
because like one of the things that I can't remember who asked this, because, like, after the first main session, we were all, like, bawling our eyes out after worship, right? And I can't remember who it was, but someone asked, like, is it like this every night? And I was like, yes, yes, it is. It is like this every night, right?
And you were right. And so, yeah, it was. You can hear everybody else talking about discipleship. So it was heavily, for me, put in my face. Discipleship. What does this mean?
Yeah.
What are you doing? Have you ever discipled anybody?
Yeah.
What does this look like? How do you get there? Thankfully, it came with answers, and not to all the questions, but to some of them. And two of the biggest things that I learned about discipleship, you guys have all already mentioned, which is vulnerability. That is so key, not only for, like, it's very interesting because I even noticed it in the sessions with the speakers and everything. When they were vulnerable with us, we all connected to them so much more. It's just a fundamental step of discipleship. Without vulnerability, we cannot create disciples. We cannot be disciplers, because Jesus was vulnerable, with everyone and open and let them in, and he was warm and inviting. And then the most important thing is Jesus operated from a place of acceptance. So he looked at every single human and accepted them first. Took all their doubts, all their worries, all their problems, and said, I'm going to choose you and accept you. And then he went from there. It was that acceptance first state. So I believe that for us to be disciplers, which I believe we all feel called to be, we have to first operate from a place of acceptance. And that means things will look different. And it might not be super different for some. It might be really different for others. We don't know, It's going to be different for me. I try to accept people, but I haven't ever prayed for that state in my life. So I believe that Jesus has something in store if we invite this state for our lives.
I think it was Jeff Vanderstelt. I think if I'm remembering his name correctly. He said that Jesus didn't just say to his disciples, hey, come check me do miracles, come watch me cast demons. He was talking about the Garden of Gethsemane when he's at his most vulnerable place, where he's literally begging, God, I don't know if I want to go through with this. If there's any chance for this cup to pass from me, he says to his 3 closest disciples, he says, come watch, right? And he didn't just say, don't see the Son of God suffer. He said, no, come into that space of vulnerability and see me struggle, which is so, I think you're right. It's so key to discipleship, because if it's just okay, I'm going to pour into you and I don't let you see me struggle, then it's not really discipleship. Right. It's not really walking with someone. It's not really growing together. And that's a big part of that discipleship process. But then also being willing to accept, right? And being willing to say we don't see eye to eye. We might never see eye to eye, but I can walk with you, right? And I know that we always talk about Aaron he's the golden retriever of the group, right? Because Aaron, tell the pod, how many friends did you make at Exponential?
How many numbers did I get, or how many friends did I make?
He's married, so they're not
don't worry. She knew about all the numbers. I probably got 30 contacts from that in those 4 days. And I plan to make good on them.
I was proud that I made 2 contacts as an introvert. And this guy's around here exchanging phone numbers with 30 people, right? And you met one of them at Disneyland.
At
Disney World, and then they happened to be on our flight.
Yep, they did.
Right? Which is
gonna have to meet them out for coffee sometime, I guess.
Yeah. That's so cool that you're as part of your personality as an extrovert, that's who you are. But I what I really love is that as an extrovert who's already in that space, I see the way you interact with our community downstairs, and how you're always very intentional about greeting someone that's new, or even if you can, I know you pull me out and you say, hey, this person's new, go give them a tour, talk to them, or you pull any one of our team and you say the same. But I love that you're seeing that even though you do that, you're recognizing there's an added depth that you can go, that you're saying God, I want to enter into that space of acceptance that is radical, the way that Jesus did it. And I love that, because you're not staying satisfied with being that extroverted person. You're I want to go deeper, God. I want to be challenged, and I want to push further than perhaps might be in my comfort zone, even as an extrovert, right?
Yeah.
Which is really awesome. So I think all of us have been challenged in different ways, right? And have been pushed to grow a little bit. So Danny, I want to come to you, and I want to what challenged you? What grew you? What was the thing that you took away?
I think the biggest theme that was going through my head there at Exponential was stress management. I think just like Ryan, and for all of us here, Expo came at a great time in my life. I think every night, or almost every night, where we would debrief, I think just the overarching theme was stress and anxiety management for myself, just because that's what I took out from it. And so I think the best thing for me was the pre-conference about stress management. So it was just like, thank you.
Yeah.
I'll take that, please. Because he talked about techniques and stories in the Bible on how stress was managed from different people in the Bible. And it's when you look back, it's just like really, really simple. But, you don't think of that when you're in the moment, when you're thinking about everything that's going on in your life, when you're trying to get every plan in your life sorted and make sure that it goes like your way, right? Because it's like, it's not going to go your way. Most likely it's not going to go your way. It's going to go his way, not going to go your way. And so when it doesn't go your way, you get stressed, right? And so that, in addition to other things, I recently moved out. I recently got a new job, and so those are huge, two big contributors to stress. And it was just nice to see that everyone who was speaking up front was going through those things, is going through those things, or at one point we're going through those things. And so I think for me, my biggest takeaway was just to take care of myself before I even think about taking care of someone else. I mean, when you're on the plane, when those oxygen masks go down, you put on yourself first before you put on someone else, or else you can't help that other person. And so I think for myself, I want to work on, and I'm actively working on. I keep telling people who ask about that trip, it's just like, I am a new person coming out from that trip, just because the things that I've learned and the way, I mean, there's multiple aspects I could talk about a lot, and that's a whole I feel like each person could have a whole podcast from this one trip. So I got to make sure to not talk about other things, but it's just really good to come out of that. I also got a book from that with about anxiety management, and it's just really cool because there was a quote that he was talking about. He quoted himself really about a story in that he asked the pastors or the prayer team in the church to pray for him because he didn't know what was going on in his life in the next coming steps. And they did, but they did the prayer wrong. And so they prayed that he would be certain about his future. But the prayer that he wanted was to have the strength for uncertainty, just because there will be uncertainty. And so for me, with all these things that have been going on in my life, and I'm wanting to know what's the next move, that's just making it worse. That's just making the wound deeper. And so I think coming out of this, honestly, it's just like the biggest eye-opening shift where I just go, you know what? Just let it be. Let it be. Whatever happens. Obviously it will be disappointing. It's going to be hard if it doesn't, go my way, right? But it's not my way that matters the most, right? It's God's, right? So I just have to understand that. And it's a simple understanding of just taking a break, thinking about it, and then redirecting your thoughts and, saying, you know what? It's not a big deal. There's time. Like Ryan said, we're 25, 26 years old. We're not washed out yet. We got a lot of time. And so, and with that, in terms of applying it, I just want to find my place in this church and in ministry. I'm currently doing worship, and I love doing that. I feel like my love language with God is worship through song, and so it's really awesome that I could do that. But I'm always looking, like it was Ryan said again. Gen Z, we're always looking for a purpose, and I'll add to that where we went to a pre-conference about Gen Z in the church, and I think it's somewhere around 80% of young people left the church in 1 year. I think it was 2022 or 2023. It makes sense if it was 2023, and it's that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people. And I'm glad I'm in that 20% just because. It's relieving to know that. And so I'm looking to find my place, my purpose in this church, beyond my worship, my participation in the worship team, but something else as well. And so I'm looking forward to that. I'm excited. So,
I know you shared last time we all talked together about because you want to be an RCMP officer, like that's kind of been your goal in life, right? Was to do that, and I know that you talked about like applying and then not getting in a few times, but you shared something that was so like that stood out for me, that you had a different perspective now. Can you tell us like really briefly do you remember what you shared last week?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Tell us a bit.
Yeah. So yeah, back in 2022, I was deferred from the RCMP process. At the last step, I was like, even my recruiter thought I was going in. And then at the last step, just for no reason, I just got a deferral letter. And so that really, really bummed me out. Just in the car, just crying. And it was tough because it was a hard process to get through, right? You can imagine what the actual process is, because that was just the recruitment process. And it was a long time. And so I committed a lot to myself to that. And so I was angry with God, just the fact that like, why would you do that? You lead me through this whole thing. And at the end, just like you're not getting in. And it's just like, dang, okay. But then I was thinking about it just last week, after we came home from pre-conference, where, or not pre-conference, from Expo and Exponential. And I was thinking, if I was accepted into the RCMP, me being a young single male, I would be probably sent to, a city in which I can't even probably pronounce, in a town of like 1,000 people where there probably isn't any church. And I think me as a people person who loves just spending time around people, I don't know how great that would be for me. But also the most important thing is that I wouldn't be able to attend Exponential, this opportunity that God and you guys as the church staff provided for me. And so I was just like, no, yeah, thank you. Like it's a little shift because, it's kind of a disappointment kind of factor. But also on top of that, I wouldn't connect with this people right here. I wasn't being a huge part of the church. I was just going to church on the days I was scheduled to sing. And so after that, there's nowhere else to go. And so Jolly's like, hey, Danny, how's it going? We got people here to sing with you. And so I would sing, and each time I would come and sing, I would listen to the lyrics, and I'd get closer to God. And it became a desire to come to church for him rather than for like just buddies that I would see, or just to check a box that I had as an obligation to volunteer, right? So I was just I did say a little prayer when I realized that, just like little thank yous, just like, oh, so that's how you work. Okay. Gotcha. But
that's so cool, because I love that shift in perspective for you. To then think like, okay, this is, maybe it didn't go my way, but I'm starting to see the picture God had. Right. And I'm grateful for it not going my way.
Exactly.
Right.
And
I think about as we think about how God is moving, in ways that might be unexpected or might frustrate us in moments, but shift us forward. I want to kind of go to the next person and ask, like, Jolly, like, what did you see? Like, what moved for you at Exponential?
Yeah, I think for me, like, there's a lot, like everyone was saying. And also this was my second time at Expo.
Yes.
So, obviously I kind of had an idea already, kind of what I was going into. But I remember I was sitting down with Pastor Nim, and I was like, how do you like keep going to these things and like getting new stuff all the time? And he was saying to me, like, I go into it every year, like not expecting, and just listening to what God has to tell me, and show me. And I go into it like it's my first time going. And so I went into this one like it was my first time again. And yeah, there was a lot of moments that God was speaking to me, but I think the biggest one for me, was just talking about, like Danny was talking about, our young people, leaving the church. And that's a question that often comes up. And sometimes I get asked that a lot, and I'm just like, I don't know what to tell you. But I just remember going to a workshop, and they were saying to us, like, sometimes we just have to look in the mirror. Like, we got to see who that person is. And how are you being intentional, and how are you being that person for the younger generation to either look up to, having that safe space, feeling like they have purpose, feeling like they're loved, because that's all they want, right? But if I'm not being that person for them, they will go and look for something like that somewhere else.
Yeah.
Right. And so for this next generation coming up, it really took me back and really think, like, how am I being intentional with our youth here at CIV, even with our young adults here at CIV, how am I showing them that I care for them? How am I showing them that I love them? How am I showing them that, you belong here? Like, you can do great things here. And your age shouldn't, turn you away from all those great things that you can do. And I know, like, for myself, I don't only I work here at CIV and serve here at the same time, but I also serve outside of CIV. Yeah. Like, I coach volleyball at my old high school, which is Fraser Valley, and yeah, and so, like, for me, I've watched these kids grow up, and because I've been there coaching for this is my 7th year. Oh my gosh, that's kind of jarring to say out loud. Yeah. But yeah, like 7 years, you go through a cycle of kids each year, and you see them grow up. Some of them come here to CIV, and sometimes, like, I will forget to say hi to them, like, when they come to church, right? But yeah, like, I'm just like, oh my goodness, like, I saw them, but I didn't see them. So now that when I see, like, my girls, or if I see our guys, like, at church, like, I will go up to them. Like, I will have a conversation with them and being like, hey, because, like, I'm not there with them every day, like Ryan is, because he teaches most of those kids. But, like, I will say, like, hey, like, how was your week? And they'll talk about their week, and then they'll go on to different tangents, and I'll just, like, be in that conversation with them. Yeah. And then, but, like, trying to build that relationship with them. So at least I'm that one person who they're like, you know what, she cared enough to know who I am. And it just starts there, right? Like, we don't have to automatically, like, throw our young people into ministries or into jobs in church, but it starts with having a relationship with them. Starts to getting to know who they are, what their likes are, what their dislikes are, and just really, like, really loving on them, and making them feel like this can be their second home.
All right, so we're back. I know if you're watching this, you'll see a quick edit because our camera overheated a little bit. It's a little hot in here. But if you're listening, then it might be seamless. I don't know. But anyways, Jolly, so you were talking about having this, like, creating a space for youth and for young people, and really just like anyone, because it doesn't have to be just youth, right? But for anyone to feel at home, like, church can be their safe space, that they don't have to have these facades or be worried about being accepted, but being that intentional person to reach out and connect with them, right?
Yeah, because I think also one thing is that church can be that place where people think, like, oh, if I'm not this person, like, I'm going to be judged. Either if that's what I look like, how I dress when I come in, the way I talk, whatever it is, like, church can be that thing that people think, like, okay, I can't be this person stepping in because I don't have everything put together. But that's what church is for. Like, church is for those people. Like, church is for anybody. Like, God didn't turn away anyone because of the way they look, or, how they talked. Like, he went out to, like, he served the people who had leprosy. Like, he went out to those who, like, the moms who
were single moms, like he went to the lowest of lows and ministered to them regardless of who they were, regardless of, but, and so like, I want to be that person for, yes, our youth, yes, our young adults, but also those people who come through our doors on Saturdays.
Because like inevitably we all have preferences, right? For whether it's like our clothing, whether it's worship, or like even just who preaches and what they preach and how they preach. Like all of us have something that we vibe with better, right? And I know like Alyssa and we were talking about something and I was complaining about it, and Alyssa's like, "Why do you even care?" She's like, "Why does that matter to you?" And I was like, "I don't know. It's just my like, I don't know why it bugs me." And it was like some Gen Z doing a Gen Z thing, right? As I'm a millennial, right? So like sometimes the Gen Z things bug me. The alpha stuff, don't even get me started, right? But it's easy for us to think, because I'm so adamant about this, like especially when I preach, it's easy for me as a millennial to say, okay, well, I want my millennial things, my millennial style, my millennial way, or my perspective, whether it's clothes or music or whatever. But regardless of where you stand on that spectrum of whether you love like super contemporary, like lights and smoke machines, and like heavy bass, or whether you're like that, we want to sit quietly and stand quietly and hymns, like it's irrelevant, because I think my challenge, and that's what I'm kind of hearing from you, is that if our perspective keeps someone away from Jesus, like is our perspective really worth holding on to? Right? Like, can we not just create that space for someone to be, to exist, to just be who they are, regardless of whether they're in our perspective or not, regardless of that, right?
Yeah, and I love how you say that, because also it just got me thinking of like our worship, right? And being, that lead for our worship team, I always try to encourage our team, like, just come as you are, like if you are there, you're there to worship, right? You're there to serve, but also you're there to be an example of those people who come in to worship. Like, don't pretend to, like, because the person next to you is raising their hand, like you have to raise your hand too. Like if your worship looks like you being still, even just closing your eyes or looking around smiling, like that's totally fine, right? Because like you never know that person who's coming in to worship with us, right? They're just like, oh, that person up there is just worshiping like how I worship. It gives them that space of like freedom and safe space for them to also just come as they are and worship as they are. So I think the biggest thing is for us to just be, accepting of those who come through our doors, and who we come in to interact with.
Yeah. That's awesome, right? And I think for anyone listening, I kind of want to extend like a little challenge. And the challenge is like, regardless of what age you are, like how are you going to be intentional about being somebody else's safe space in church, right? I don't know, like Esther, you're the youngest in our group, right? Which I love to see that like you're gung-ho about like coming to this church planting conference, and it's like, because I got 20, I know like you would not catch me at a place like that when I was 20, you know what I mean? So I love that like you're coming into this space and like just like willing to learn and grow and be challenged. And so what was it for you? Like what was the highlight?
I will say like before Expo happened, like few weeks before, I would always talk to Alex and have like a pregame talk, and we're like, so when we go, we're gonna go in there with an open mind. Like we don't know what we're gonna learn about ourselves, like what career paths God's calling us to, whatever. Like, just go with an open mind and make sure that it's you and God. Once you step through that door, like leave everything behind that, like your life, work, just forget about it, because this is like an opportunity, like for all of us. Like who would have thought Pastor Nim would invest in us young adults to go to something like this? Because we're not really on like the pastoral team, nothing, right? We're just members of the church that are going, right? So that just takes a lot of trust and confidence that he put in us, to know that we were worth investing in whatever way we would come back as. So with that, I kind of went with an open mind. And also serving in the Journey class. I was asked to teach by Sancho like a year and a half ago.
Yeah, so Sancho's one of our elders. In fact, he's our head
Shout out to
elder.
Sancho.
And then Journey class is like that preteen, like that.
Yes.
What is it, like 11 to 13 or 11 to 12?
Yeah.
Somewhere around that age, right? Yeah.
The young, awkward.
Yeah, right before you get into like that
Awkward.
teenage years.
Huh?
You're being awkward.
I am the definition of awkward. So
Yeah,
it's okay.
yeah. But yeah, you get to step into that role and like teach and lead
Yeah.
like 12-year-olds, 11-year-olds, which is super cool. But
It
yeah,
is. It's challenging, honestly, because sometimes when I'm about to teach, I'm just like, I don't even know what to teach these kids. Like, what do I have to say? Like, sometimes I just stand there and be like, hey, so how's your week? I start off with that first.
Yeah.
Because I just want them to get comfortable. Because
Yeah.
sometimes Sabbath school is just like, gonna open the Bible, read these verses, get my snack, leave. Like, that's what they see.
snack is important.
Yeah, snack is
right?
important. If it doesn't happen, there's a rage. Like, you never know what would happen. But, so when Sancho asked me to take on that role, I was kind of skeptical. I was like, he wants me to teach these kids? And I kind of spoke to Alex about it. I was like, why did he ask me? Like, why?
Yeah.
And that was around the time that I came back from school. So I was like, right off the jump, asked to lead in a ministry. I was like, whoa, there's a lot going on. But then, I kind of like took a moment, thought through about it all. And I was like, you know what? This is actually maybe where I need to be and teach these young kids. Because I look back on like me as a young adult and my whole journey with church and how I like am here now. And I want to create a space where I, like, when I was young, I felt welcomed in that way, because in one of the sessions that we were at, they stated that ministry is a partnership, and if it's a win, for me, it's a win for all, for the kingdom, right? So the whole thing of ministry is not just for the church, it's for the kingdom. There's so much, it's a bigger picture than just where we go as CIV and everything. So especially with this stats of 80% of young adults leaving.
Yeah.
When Alex and I went to the women's ministry, women in discipleship. That one. There weren't a lot of young women, and I got really scared because I was like, is this happening in every church as well?
Yeah.
But then I got scared, but it kind of comforted me in a way, because then I looked back at our church and I said, there's a group of young adults that came here for that purpose, to make that change, to make that move, so that we can bring back everyone, or start young at Journey, or before that, to like put that light in them, that passion, like I want to be here, I know I have a space. And also in another session, it was about the Gen Z, I think, one we went to, and how like kids these days, they have knowledge at the fingertips. They know a lot. So do not belittle them, because you never know if they can outdo you.
Yeah.
Never know.
Yeah.
Like, because everything in this world is it's accessible.
Yeah.
Right? So just creating that space where you acknowledge that they do know, that they can know more than you, and then that will allow them to like be confident in that space and grow. And in that way of a partnership, like starting them young to feel confident to step into these roles where the older people might be in, like worship, I don't know, like volunteering, front desk, like all that stuff. Sometimes it's just older people there, but changing that narrative that you can start at 5, sometimes we have Wyatt and Noah at the front door, like that is so welcoming, like this child is passionate.
And they're like 5 and 6 or 7.
Yeah, right? So like there's no age to ministry. There's no age to having that passion, right? That's what I have so far.
I really love that, like, you're doing, like, teaching Journey, the 11, 12s, and that you're thinking about that, like, the 5s and 7s. And I love it even more so because, again, like, you're 20. And not in a way that's, like, demeaning at all. But what I mean is, like, this is the age group that is leaving church. And this is the age group where even if you haven't left church, the majority of them are checked out.
Yeah.
And church is just a thing that they do
Yes.
to get over because
Yeah.
they might still live at home and they have to and whatever, right?
Yeah.
So I really appreciate you, Esther, that you're not just here and present in church, but you're thinking about how am I leading and investing in the next generation of leaders,
Yeah.
which is so key and crucial because we often think about, I don't know, because we lead churches and we talk about it at our pastors' meetings and all, how do we get the millennials? How do we get, and I'm thinking like, man, like we've already kind of messed that up a little bit. And so we need to not forget them, but we also need to think about how do we cater to that younger group so that we don't lose them at all.
Yeah.
Right? And
Yeah.
I love that you're on that train of thought of like, how am I going to create that space for that 5 and that 7-year-old?
Because
Right.
I will say, like, me being 20, I was at that spot where I was like, do I have to go to church? Because at this
Yeah.
moment in time, I have my own transportation.
Yeah.
I don't have to come here, you know?
Yeah.
So just knowing that I've been through that moment where I'm like, I don't really want to be here, just another Saturday.
Yeah.
Maybe I can go somewhere else. But thankfully, I stuck through
Yeah.
a lot. But like you said, if it starts there at the
Yeah.
young ones, you know, it just the passion just grows
Yeah.
bigger, you know?
Yeah.
So just, you know, creating that church where there's a partnership with all ages. It's not
Yeah.
just the old, it's not just the, you know, young adults. There's
Yeah.
everyone. So,
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome because you don't have to be here.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, well, we're Hispanic, so
Oh,
like
yeah.
like
Sometimes
you
we
know,
have a
no
little
matter how old you are,
reprimanding.
you got kids yourself, like your parents still gonna whoop you,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know? But I love that like you're not stuck here, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you choose to serve and you choose to give back. And you know, one of the things that I really love about like this conversation that we all get to have, and that as we're all reflecting, because I've seen all of you grow. Like I've seen all of you within the last year, you know, and Ryan, who's come recently. I've seen all of you, how you started in ministry, at least like, you know, in my time here, like all of you were involved in some, but I've seen you grow and get more involved. And I love that you're getting more involved, but I've also seen such a shift in your mentality as a result of having gone to Exponential, that these ministries no longer become just a thing that you do for the sake of your church. And I love the way that you put it. This is like a bigger picture that we're playing here. This is not just for church growth. This is kingdom expansion, right? And I love what they say at Exponential. We're not here to make churches grow. We're here to make churches multiply, right? Because if we're just adding numbers, but we're not expanding the kingdom, like our growth is irrelevant, right? And I know in one of the conferences they talked about that, where they said if we're not making disciples at church, we're not succeeding as a church. And if all we're doing is just increasing our attendance, but not increasing people that are involved in the kingdom, that are discipling in their communities, then we do not have a successful church. And I love that we as kind of like young people who are pretty heavily involved in ministry, because everyone here is involved in like 3 or 4 different ministries, right? Are seeing that shift that can then pass that on to the next group, that can then talk about it, that can then live it, which is more important. And then people can see it, whether they're older or younger, can see that fire that's been kind of lit under all of you and under us, because I know this is my second year and it really just inspired me again in my second year to see kind of how the church is going to grow and change, and maybe not in ways that are going to be like immediate and instant, but we're not looking for that immediate growth. We're looking for that sustainable, continual life change. Where we're not just seeing, again, just numbers added, we're seeing literal souls being won for the kingdom of God. And that's the whole, like, that's the reason we do what we do. And I love that you are thinking that way. Like, it is the greatest inspiration to, like, see people like you do that. Because, I don't know, like, I think about, even though I'm a pastor and I'm, like, 31, turning 32, like, I think about what would have happened if someone had invested in me earlier, right? Like, maybe I would have accepted my call, you know, a little earlier. Maybe I would have struggled less. Maybe I would have rebelled a little less, right? And so I'm grateful that you get to do that for someone in the future. And I know for a fact, I believe this, that someone is going to look back and their relationship with God, they're going to say it's because of one of you here in in these chairs. That they're going to look back and say, like, I grew and I have a relationship with God because of Danny, because of Ryan, because of Esther, Jolly, Alex, Alyssa, Aaron, Meredith, right? Like, they're going to say, you're going to be that catalyst for them, which is so cool. Like, it makes me, like, emotional a little bit, right? I'm going to try not to be emotional, but, like, it is, right? To see souls being won. And it's a journey. Like, I know that all of you guys have had different people pour into your lives, and it's not like Exponential was the magic key that suddenly fixed everything. But for a lot of us, it really was that shift where we saw things differently, that helped us see it differently. And so what I really love, and this is where I'm just gonna kind of plug an ad for for our church and for our listeners, is that, like, we want to continue investing in people. We want to continue investing in not just young people, but people across the spectrum, people from our churches. And I know one of our goals, like, especially like Nim and I, we want to keep taking groups to Exponential. We want to take more and more people so that they can see the fire, they can catch the vision, they can live differently and multiply and think discipleship versus just attendance or growth, right? And so that's kind of your opportunity as the listener, right? That none of this is possible without the funds. And so I do want to challenge you, and I do want to encourage you to think about, in your heart, if you've got something extra to give to discipleship, specifically at Church in the Valley, so that we can continue doing things like this, so that we can continue pouring into and investing in new generations of leadership, people that maybe have not had that opportunity. And again, across the age spectrum, right? People who maybe have not had that intentional pouring into, that can have that light bulb moment and think, yeah, this is for the kingdom, right? So thanks for listening. Thanks for talking, you guys. Thanks for sharing your experiences. I know that for a lot of you guys, you've had time to process now over the last couple of days, and I'm really grateful that you got to be part of the first team that we take from CIV. And I'm looking forward to what God's going to do through each of you. And for those of you that are listening, I'm also hopeful and looking forward to what we're able to do with the next group of people that we take, thanks to your generous donations. And so you can head to our website, Adventist Giving. There's a bunch of different places to get in contact with us if you want to know how to give. But thank you for making this possible for these people. Because, again, none of this would have been possible without your support. And so we just want to encourage you to continue to support. And again, whatever you take from whatever was said here, I pray that it challenges you and that it moves you into thinking of ministry differently and that it moves you into ministering differently. So I think we'll close out with our send-off, right? So our classic send-off is love God,
love people,
serve the world.
All right. We'll see you next time on the CIV Podcast.